afternoon, live from Toronto on the GBKM network. This is the Chat Up Show, the show where we catch you up with the chat up of our weekly headlines. I'm your host, Elizabeth Eloidy, and I hope that you are ready to chat it up with me today. Now, as always, you know you can keep up with the GBKM network in various ways. You can listen and watch live 24/7 at www.gbkm.tv or www.gbkm.fm, where you can catch up on any past shows you may have missed, check out our upcoming show schedule, learn a little bit more about our on-air personalities, check out our breaking news tab, all of the good stuff. You can also download our free GBKM app that is available for all iOS and Android devices right now. Okay, make sure you download the app so you can keep up with us. You can take us along the way. You can take us on the go. You can listen on the go. And the best part is you get the exact same features as on our web station on the app. So past shows, upcoming shows, on-air personality, like, share, comment, subscribe, breaking news, all of that good stuff. And you will be notified every time we go live. So you won't miss another live show again as long as you turn on your notifications. We will let you know anytime GBKM is going live so you can keep up with us right here on the network. You can also continue to watch us live on Facebook and YouTube at GBKM Network. You can follow us on Instagram and Twitter at GBKM Network to receive more updates on what is going on here at the network. Now, this past week, the world has watched on as news of the Taliban taking over Afghanistan has essentially taken over our headlines and airwaves. Now, this fight essentially against the Taliban has been reported for nearly, over 2 decades now, just over 2 decades, 20 years, but has been going on and kind of bubbling below the surface for longer than that. Taliban fighters on Sunday took over the Afghan capital of Kabul, and President Ashraf Ghani fled abroad. So this is what we know so far. This then left the government in collapse as US-led military operation began to airlift Western diplomats, civilians, and Afghans likely to be targeted by the country's new rulers. Now, Ghani later posted on Facebook that he had chosen to leave the country to avert bloodshed in the capital without saying where he had gone. Of course, media later reported that he is possibly in Uzbekistan right now. In his Facebook post, Ghani said he believed countless patriots would be martyred and the city of Kabul will be destroyed if he had stayed behind. He also went on to say, quote, "The Taliban have won and are now responsible for the honor, property, and self-preservation of their countrymen," end quote. Now, we're hearing all of these things and, you know, sitting on this side of things in Canada, we're often wondering, like, how are we involved? Who else is involved? Who have been the major players in what has gone on in Afghanistan in the last 2 decades? Now, we're going to dive into this conversation today on the Chat Up Show, while also looking at who could potentially be to blame for this takeover, for the Taliban to be able to take over the country and especially the capital cities. Now, joining me here to discuss this topic today is a very special guest, going to be my guest co-host for today. It's Mr. Kenny Baz. Welcome to the Chat Up Show officially.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Of course.
Nice sitting on this side of the aisle.
No,
It's so nice, so nice.
we let him
What a
in front of
great
the
topic.
camera.
Yes, I'm happy to be sitting on your side. Hi, everybody. It's nice to be here today. It's, I don't know, can we say it's sad or it's mixed feelings?
It's you know what I think mixed feelings for. We're going to look at it from different angles, of course. There are different reasons why certain people feel that yes, this needed to happen to kind of send a message to some of the big powers and players working or I guess invested in the country. But then at the same time, you don't want to see anyone get hurt. And, you know, so far, I mean, there haven't been a lot of deaths or casualties. I think up to 12 have been reported as of yesterday, and 2 deaths, I believe, from the last report we received. But yeah, I guess mixed feelings. What are your thoughts when, you know, you first heard the news?
To be honest, I first of all just pictured Nigeria. Just imagine it was Nigeria, Boko Haram. If, for example, you want to go by what the media are saying, which is Taliban, you want to compare them like Boko Haram. Like, just think of Boko Haram taking over Nigeria.
Yeah.
Yeah, I I don't know. I kind of gave me a very uh, weird mixed feelings. However, I was able to digest it and then dissect it, and I guess my opinion is a little bit, you know, on both sides.
A little different, yeah. I mean, I think, hearing from the leaders and the spokesperson of the Taliban group especially gave a different kind of perspective. And a lot of people are taking note that maybe this is an evolved group, that this isn't the same Taliban we were looking at 20 years ago.
I believe so, but what really shocked me before we even go there is how they took over.
Yeah.
If you look at the map here that you put here, how they took over and so on, they took over really, really quick. If you see rapidly here, how the whole space is evolving. And so I don't know if you can see it here. They're all showing up,
So just to
covering up.
speak about this map, this is a map that came from the Long War Journal, and it shows how the Taliban were able to essentially gain control of Afghanistan from the dates of April 13, 2021, which is April of this year, to about August 15th or August 10th, rather. And it is very quick because in the space of a few months, it kind of went from scattered control to now we're seeing majority control with only a few that are contested.
That's the reason I brought that up is if they were unable to achieve this for these years, they have been sidelined. What changed?
Like, what was it this year?
That changed that enabled them to go to take over, and not only take over in that rapid manner. What changed?
I mean, for one, it was announced that the U.S. was going to be withdrawing the military, and they had plans that as of May, the U.S. military will be out of Afghanistan, with the belief, let's call it, that the U.S. had trained the Afghani military to be able to handle the Taliban and what was essentially considered left of the Taliban once the U.S. had ousted this group, let's call them, in the early 2000s. So along that train of thought, what possibly could have changed is the fact that there wasn't that much U.S. military influence within the country that allowed for this vacuum.
I agree with you, but if you look at it, in the time, from that time to yesterday or 2 days ago, you want to look at it from another angle, from ammunition angle, from strategies angle, or finance angle, logistic angle. You don't just take over a city without planning, or a country without planning. You can't just go to war without ammunition. If you apply or you buy ammunition, they don't vanish, they don't disappear. You have to logistically transport it. They have to be strategic. Most especially an organization that was kind of on the sidelines, so they don't have the power, the luxury to just transport it overnight. They have to strategically plan it. So when against all this backdrop, you wonder what happened. How did this happen that rapidly, where the president had to flee? So who is sponsoring who? Who is enabling or disenabling some stuff? What really happened? That's a question that a lot of people are not asking right now. It's easy to say because America has announced to leave and so on. Yes, if you look at the history, you will see that, yes, sometimes when they leave, they take over, but not this quick. And how did this Taliban come about?
Well, that is actually a good question. Now, Taliban is one of the Islamic guerrilla groups that had emerged in Afghanistan post-Soviet Union, I would say. And let's go into the history of it, actually, because this is looking into the influence of the United States specifically. So in the late 1990s, or actually before that, to ensure that the Soviets wouldn't take over Afghanistan, the US came in and were like, let's help ensure that this doesn't happen. And then once that had happened, they left the country in the hands of these, what they're called Islamic guerrillas, but they're actually, the other term is mujahid. Oh, sorry, that's the name of the person. There's another term for it. It's escaping my mind. But now these Islamic guerrillas, these groups had essentially gained control, or were handed control, if you will, by the United States. And then when the United States were like, okay, our job is done. Soviets are no longer posing a threat right now. Our relations between Afghanistan are still okay. We can go back home and retreat. within that time of retreating, the Taliban emerged as the victorious group after some years of tension and fighting, essentially to take control and to take power.
So
Like they
you
could
mean
have
like-
all these different groups.
Like the Taliban took out all the other groups.
They took out all the other groups, yes.
Who empowered them?
Well, theoretically speaking, they received the funding and the equipment from the United States.
So let's establish that could be the beginning of the Taliban. So now the question is, how did they now? How did the marriage end? The marriage between the American and Taliban.
Well, you know,
See, let's take it slowly because this is important.
of course. I mean, if we're looking at the history, it was the Taliban that started gearing towards more fundamental, radical Islamic views. And the U.S. was not happy with that. You know, democracy is always number one. And I feel like a lot of the U.S.'s foreign policy, especially during the 1990s and the early 2000s, was to ensure that democracy was available to all countries across the globe. So when the Taliban started, you know, running things in Afghanistan with not as much regard for democracy and more so this is Sharia law and we are an Islamic state now, the U.S. wasn't happy about that. And then, of course, 9/11 happened, and that created a whole new narrative that could be painted.
So it is safe, if the account is correct, to say that Taliban was actually created and empowered by the United States.
I'd say more empowered rather than created. But yes, I mean, essentially they were given control.
Because when I was going through the topic, I saw your topic was who is to be blamed.
Yeah.
And we're trying to dig down before we get to what is actually happening. We cannot we need to have at least opinion of how the genesis,
Yeah.
so that we know how the revelation is going to look like.
Yeah.
So if they empower them, how did the America get it wrong then? Because if they empower them and then the marriage, they divorced, why the divorce and what led to what? Because from what we are seeing here, I saw a video, I'm not sure if you have it, where even the flights, they were all flooding
Yeah,
into
we actually do have the video, the images of people who are trying to flee Afghanistan.
Okay, so let's try and see if we can actually run the video.
Yes.
Of the image of the people that was trying to flee the country. Now, if you are telling me that, hold on, I think this is it. If you are telling me that they created it, this is the video where people were trying to fall in. This is the video. You hear people, they're trying to evacuate. As soon as when I saw this, my heart tanked. What was your response? What was your feeling when you saw this?
I mean, I think it shows that people really genuinely just, it's a lot of fear and it's a lot of uncertainty of what could potentially come of this new takeover. You know, looking at the history of how the Taliban had conducted business, as you could say, in the past, I think a lot of people are just fearful that they don't ever want to go back to that. They don't want to put themselves in jeopardy, their family in jeopardy. So if this is the option to hopefully find a way to evacuate, it's sad that, you know, it's essentially risking your life. I mean, that plane was moving that we just saw, and people were trying to hold on to the
People
wheels.
died. People actually died from this. A lot of people, I won't say, a lot. One life is even more than too much.
Yeah.
Died in this process, and that's very heartbreaking. Now, will you say that seeing this and seeing the amount of people that are willing to flee the country, one can say that yes, the Taliban are not good for that country. They are no good. They're actually oppressing their people, because in a situation whereby people are willing to die.
I think it's different though because of the past. I think that's what a lot of people are going off of. They're like, they don't want this to get to that point. So let's ensure that the people who need to get out can get out safely, and then potentially deal with the takeover situation.
So before we even go there, I have a question. I'm just wondering, anybody that is watching now can share, like, and comment too. We'll read it as soon as possible. Now, is it a good thing that the American actually left?
I'm going to ask you that. I'm going to turn it back on you. Do you think it's a good thing that they... Before you answer, just to give a little context, the plans for the Americans to withdraw military troops from Afghanistan were since the Obama administration. So this wasn't a new, like this wasn't because Joe Biden came into power that now American troop, the United States rather, the United States government were wanting to withdraw their troops. This was something that was put into place that Obama had put out a detailed plan and timeline of how to safely withdraw from Afghanistan. And then the Trump administration came and it kind of halted for a little bit because Trump had tried to sign a peace deal with the Taliban during his presidency as well. And then, of course, that didn't really go anywhere. It didn't really reach a resolution or conclusion as I'm sure the government would have hoped for of some kind. And now with President-elect Joe Biden in the position of power, now we're seeing how we're gonna see how he handles it. But the plans to withdraw were not new. Like this was in the works for a few years.
What I'm going to say here is one thing we all must understand, no matter who is ruling America, America comes first. It can be a black man ruling, it can be Joe Biden, it can be Kenny Bazwai, it can be anybody. American foreign policy remain the same. It can be tweaked, can be modified. The interests of America come first. It's clear that Joe Biden is following what was already in existence. But the question remains, if their interest, what was their interest at the beginning when they came into the country? Let's discuss that. What do you think was the interest of Americans coming? Because we know about how they came from, I think it was
1830s actually.
So let's go back to 18.
Okay,
what was their interest?
So 1830s was essentially the first documented relationship between the U.S. and Afghanistan, and that was when Josiah Harlan, who was an American, quote, adventurer and political activist, had tried to go to Afghanistan to become king of Afghanistan, but instead it was during the, I think, the Indo-China conflict, and instead he became a prince. Actually, he was given the title of a prince in exchange for military help and education and stuff. So if we actually look back at it, since the 1800s, the U.S. has been involved in the Afghanistani military or the Afghan military for centuries.
So my question is, somebody leave his own country, go to another country to become a king. Let's start from there. So let's take it from there. I'm not in a position to say who and why and what happened. Let's take it from there. Now, let's pretend that's the genesis of the problem. Fast forwarding, do you think the American was in Afghanistan for the interest of the Afghanistan or for the Americans? Yeah, my guess is as good as yours. So, should America, to answer your question, leave? No.
Because they still have an interest?
If you are in the, no, in my opinion, they left because there's nothing to take anymore. No matter who is the president, the foreign policy remains the same. There's nothing to take anymore.
So do you think that America should then be involved?
We know, this is my own opinion, and I'm entitled to my opinion, America don't win a war. They go in and stay. And they will be there
forever.
So this happens to be that the lifeline is run dry, and I believe the war cannot fund himself anymore, or the military cannot fund themselves anymore. Because if you listen to what the president Joe Biden said, you will realize that we have a big problem, because Joe Biden's clearly make us understood that they can't continue. They can't continue with the way it's going. They can't fund itself. It can't stand. He made it clear. So, if whatever, in my opinion, whatever they are generating as an income or in returns, Americans are not just there because they are their charity.
I mean, there are claims regarding the opium and heroin production costs as well, or the production of it that's soared in Afghanistan over the last last decades, and it's like a wonder why that has. And there, American influence is still very much there. And you wonder if what is funding these certain things? Is it coming from this?
My own opinion is it's just that they are spending more than they are making, so it doesn't make sense. But there's the other spin, on the other side. What if the Taliban now become the traditional Taliban that the media has made them look?
Well, I think that's what a lot of people are fearing.
So, if that's the case, did it worth it, them leaving?
Well, was it worth it the 20 years that they were there too?
So that's the crossroad that we are now. Like, is it a good decision that they were there for 20 years? Is it a good decision for them to continue given the price they may pay? But even talking about the price, remember let's see what Joe Biden said. I'm interested in what Joe Biden said in his press conference yesterday.
We have that clip now.
Was at its strongest militarily since 2001. The choice I had to make as your president was either to follow through on that agreement or be prepared to go back to fighting the Taliban in the middle of the spring fighting season. There would have been no ceasefire after May 1. There was no agreement protecting our forces after May 1. There was no status quo of stability without American casualties after May 1. There was only the cold reality of either following through on the agreement to withdraw our forces or escalating the conflict and sending thousands more American troops back into combat in Afghanistan, lurching into the third decade of conflict. I stand squarely behind my decision. After 20 years, I've learned the hard way that there was never a good time to withdraw U.S. forces. That's why we're still there. We were clear-eyed about the risks. We planned for every contingency, but I always promised the American people that I would be straight with you. The truth is, this did unfold more quickly than we had anticipated. So what's happened? Afghanistan political leaders gave up and fled the country. The Afghan military collapsed, sometime without trying to fight. If anything, the developments of the past week reinforced that ending U.S. military involvement in Afghanistan now was the right decision. American troops cannot and should not be fighting in a war and dying in a war that Afghan forces are not willing to fight for themselves. We spent over $1 trillion. We trained and equipped an Afghan military force with some 300,000 strong, incredibly well equipped, a force larger in size than the militaries of many of our NATO allies. We gave them every tool they could need. We paid their salaries, provided for the maintenance of their Air Force, something the Taliban doesn't have. Taliban does not have an Air Force. We provided close air support. We gave them every chance to determine their own future. What we could not provide them was the will to fight for that future. There's some very brave and capable Afghan special forces units and soldiers. But if Afghanistan is unable to mount any real resistance to the Taliban now, there is no chance that 1 year, 1 more year, 5 more years, or 20 more years of U.S. military boots on the ground would have made any difference. Here's what I believe to my core. It is wrong to order American troops to step up when Afghanistan's own armed forces would not. The political leaders of Afghanistan were unable to come together for the good of their people. unable to negotiate for the future of their country when the chips were down. They would never have done so while U.S. troops remained in Afghanistan, bearing the brunt of the fighting for them. And our true strategic competitors, China and Russia, would love nothing more than the United States to continue to funnel billions of dollars in resources and attention into stabilizing Afghanistan indefinitely. When I hosted President Ghani and Chairman Abdullah at the White House in June, and again when I spoke by phone to Ghani in July, we had very frank conversations. We talked about how Afghanistan should prepare to fight their civil wars after the U.S. military departed, to clean up the corruption in government so the government could function for the Afghan people. We talked extensively about the need for Afghan leaders to unite politically. They failed to do any of that. I also urged them to engage in diplomacy, to seek a political settlement with the Taliban. This advice was flatly refused. Mr. Ghani insisted the Afghan forces would fight, but obviously he was wrong. So I'm left again to ask of those who argue that we should stay, how many more generations of America's daughters and sons would you have me send to fight Afghanistan's civil war when Afghan troops will not? How many more lives, American lives, is it worth?
And that was a clip from President Joe Biden's press conference earlier this week. Now, there were a few things that popped up in that little segment. But first, starting from the beginning, right? He mentioned that May 1st was the deadline. But if we go back to the map that we saw, dating from April 13th, we saw the Taliban slowly starting to infiltrate into the center of, into capital cities. And it begs to wonder, was it because of this May 1st deadline that the U.S. decided not to immediately intervene?
Even before that, it started with a whole bag of blame.
Yes.
It started with, I don't know if that's blame, if he's expressing what they did, and he moved on. Before he moved on, he made sure he told the viewers and the listeners that they failed themselves. The Taliban, the country failed themselves. That it wasn't them, and that brings me to he repeated that, and he was very, very, very firm about that.
Yeah.
So that's a big point we cannot forget. Going back to your own point, is it safe to say that because they are leaving, that's why they couldn't even help to respond? Because the takeover was already initiated from that map.
It was actually, the takeover was kind of initiated from 2017.
So
there are maps dating back to 2017 that show the slow infiltration of the Taliban into these major capital cities. But this siege was rather quick. Like, the majority happened within this last little bit of time.
To me, the fact that it was this quick is a sign of nothing was done.
Yeah.
Because if you look at that speech, he even said that the Taliban doesn't have air force, but the Afghanistan have air force. They were trained, they were paid, and salary were paid, and so on. I don't have the facts to say that's true or lie, but are you saying that, I don't understand, are you saying that there was nothing at all to even fight? I mean, there's a combat. There's a fight that you fight, and you say you fought and you lost.
Yeah, because I mean, seeing how the Afghan military just essentially retreated, government officials just retreated. Like, it didn't seem like there was much of a fight.
No resistance. That's what I meant to say.
And you know what? That's actually an interesting comment and note to bring up, because do you believe that that's because they knew that the U.S. wasn't going to back them up? So then they felt that the muscle behind it.
There's 2 or 3 levels of backup.
Yeah.
The first backup that they have started since 18 something is equipping them, training them, funding them, giving them ammunition, and so on and so forth. Now, the backup we are talking about now is not the backup at the end. It's the existing backup that I was given. Where is those training? Where is those officers that was promoted? Where is the aircraft that was given? Where
300,000.
yeah,
that they trained.
where are they right now? Like, there's not, like, if somebody is coming to your house and they take over your house, record will have it that you resisted. So, my question is,
Why was there no
it
resistance?
sounds fishy. It sounds there's something going on. Maybe there's something politically that we don't understand, because it's natural for somebody to fight for their home before their home is taken. This looks like it was just like, the door was not open. It's like, come in, the door is open, just walk in.
President Ghani even said that they won. The Taliban won. And coming from the leader of the country, like, that's a little disheartening, because you are the person that your citizens look up to. They that know, like, listen, we're gonna fight for you. We're gonna fight for our freedom, whatever it is that you're fighting for. But to see that he, who is capable of getting himself to safety, just left and said, listen, they won. I didn't want to stay because I didn't want there to be any bloodshed. I'm going to retreat and find my safety. I'm essentially going to leave civilians
the way
to
those
find
things
theirs.
work is, there's nothing that happened that the president, there's an intelligent community. The president must have called and said, hi, Switzerland, are you taking me for asylum? Hi, Germany, are you taking me? Those things, in my opinion, must have been planned out. Now, one will argue, based on the President Joe Biden's speech, saying that how many American lives do we have to take more? My question is, these are things you should have asked before you even go in.
Yep.
These are stuff, there are different ways, because at the end, this is my opinion now. There's so much country they are involved in.
Yeah. The U.S. specifically.
And if you look, there's a pattern. There's something that is always repeating. Sometimes religion is being sold. Sometimes freedom is sold. Sometimes democracy is sold. A lot of things have been sold just to come in. What we don't know is what they get in return. It's good for somebody or some country to lead. But I don't know how safe it is for one country to be the police of the world.
Well, I mean, especially since the world is essentially trying to police that same country now as well.
So it's difficult for you to be the biggest donor and the biggest debtor. It's a very difficult position, and most times, I remember when we were in school, it gives you the ability, the muscles to flex as somebody that can monopolize things, or an entity or a company or a country that can monopolize things, which a lot of people are failing as we speak now. I am not speaking in favor of the Taliban, but I'm just saying that,
How did we get here?
how do we get here and how do we get out? And if you look at the Taliban speech, the Taliban, first time in history, formed the government, occupied the government house, and make a press conference.
And had a spokesperson ready on camera.
So I don't think they planned the election and say you're going to be the spokesperson overnight.
No. Well, because this has been the long time spokesperson. This is just the first ever, he did the first ever, TV interview appearance and was interviewed by a woman, which a lot of people were like, this is major for a Taliban.
If you look at the press conference, I don't know if you have it here.
We do, we have it.
If you look at the press conference, you will see that if what the Taliban said on that press conference is true, then somebody has been lying to us.
Something's different.
That's not the Taliban we have seen in the media, the picture we have seen in the media. In my opinion, that is not the picture of the Taliban we have been seeing in the media. Unless you want to tell me there's a new Taliban overnight.
I mean, over 20 years.
Or they just lied to the world. Because I see, if the videos we saw from credible organizations like us, having women doing the interviews and all those stuff, as I speak, the American embassy is still protected.
Yep.
It's not, nobody went there. The capital city,
even the Russian,
everywhere is still protected. The question is this the Taliban we have been seeing in the media?
And honestly, the Taliban has even come out, like the group.
But well, the spokesperson of the group.
Yeah.
The group is not. You're not going to see the whole group.
Yeah.
This.
The spokesperson has come out and
yeah,
said, like,
that's the
we
group.
don't, we
Yeah.
want to ensure that the people can evacuate safely. We're not going to go.
Now, before we even go into the video, somebody sent me an email and said, oh, they're talking about religion, or they'll give women rights based on their Islamic religion. My email the reply was, who am I to tell them which religion is correct? If you do a general consensus, you will see that majority of them are Muslim. Who am I not to say that your values are inferior to my values? So if they're saying that they will respect the women based on their Sharia or Islamic ways of doing things, the question who am I to say is wrong? And what if they turn around and say I'm wrong?
I mean,
You see, so I don't know. The only way, in my opinion, we all can coexist is to allow everybody to exist as long as you are not infringing into my rights. If they have said Sharia law will work in US, they want to impose it. Or they will want to impose it in Canada. They want to impose it in Nigeria.
so you're not of the belief that because my brother somewhere else in the world is suffering, as long as it doesn't reach my home?
That's not what I'm saying. I believe that we all should be, empathy is very important. But at the same time, they said there's freedom of speech. Everybody has freedom of speech, but you can have freedom of speech at my own detriment. So what I'm saying here is that if the country believe that this is what will work for them, who am I to say that they must do it my way?
Yeah. Well, I mean, honestly, and I think that there are certain people who would agree with the Taliban stance of today, right now, that maybe we do need to get rid of the Western influence. That not everything that is done in the West is necessarily correct. Not everything that is done in the West is perfect. That not all government styles that are followed in the West are what, culturally other places in the world need to follow. It wasn't an issue to have an Islamic a government in power before, when the U.S. essentially said, here, the new Islamic State government can be in charge of Afghanistan. But now that it's not going according to their beliefs of governance and leading and ruling a country, then that's when we have the issues like we do from 2001, where George W. Bush says we're going to go in and we're going to try and infiltrate and train their military to ensure that this isn't going to go past the borders. It's not going to spread, say, to the US and Canada and to other parts of the world, because I think that a lot of the threat or the war on terror, as it's been labeled, was to ensure that the ideals that were so different from Western ideals do not go past and infiltrate and essentially be like a second colonialism, if you will. But that's really interesting because then...
You see, I agree with you, and I don't want us to downplay the fact that they are extremists. There are a lot of extremists, be in the Christian side, be in the Muslim side, they are extreme. Now, some may argue that the Muslim extremists are more aggressive and they are heartless, or the Christians are more, or they are heartless. That can be argued. I'm not speaking for the extreme now. I'm just talking about an average person that is normal. Because my argument here is that I am a Christian because I was born in a geographical location whereby everybody around me was Christians. I bet if I was born...
Even then, that was through colonialism.
Yeah, even then. But if I was born in a Muslim environment, the chances of me being a Muslim is higher. So it's influence. So now, because I'm born in that area, my beliefs, my thought process will be geared towards that direction. You travel from your area now because you are born in a geographical location, you happen to be Christian, and now tell me my way of living, my way of doing things is wrong. I'd see a little bit of problem in that. I see that that's a little bit. Now, again, if your practice is now infringing into your right, or as a country right, another country right.
And it's harming people.
It's harming people. That's another thing. But there's another twist to it. Because the world is globalizing, you might not say, okay, human rights society, human rights of the world, blah, blah, blah. So for this reason, whatever is happening in Afghanistan is impacting everybody. I believe in that too. I believe that to a degree because the world is globalizing.
Yeah.
But however, you still cannot just outrightly impose your ways of life into them. Another thing that we must not forget before we watch the press conference, a little bit of clip of the press conference, we must not forget is that there are billions of dollars that have been spent in media. And like they say, if you want to kill a man, you change his name. So there have been positive publicity and negative publicity on both aisles.
Yeah.
And we know who has the more money and who is willing to spend more money. So the question here is, the Taliban we saw today in the press conference, are they credible? If they are, did they change from the original Taliban? If they change, why did they change? Let's take a look at the video at least. Let's see what's going on now.
We assure the people of Kabul that there will be no excesses against them and they will live in peace. Afghans have given great sacrifices for the establishment of an Islamic government and they have the right to implement Sharia Islamic government in Afghanistan.
What assurances can you give to women and girls that their rights will be protected?
We recognize the rights of the women which Islam gave them. Women can work, they can go to the school, they can work in schools, they can work in hospitals. We assure the world that there will be no excesses against the women and everything will be done under the Islamic laws. We assure the entire world, the people of Kabul, diplomats living in Kabul, the world bodies, the NGOs, all the organizations that from now on, no one will be threatened and there will be no access against anybody. We assure the people of Kabul that there will be no excesses against them and they will live in peace. Afghans have given great sacrifices for the establishment of an Islamic government and they have the right to implement Sharia Islamic government in Afghanistan.
What assurances can you give to women and girls that their rights will be protected?
We recognize the rights of the women which Islam gave them. Women can work, they can go to the school, they can work in schools, they can work in hospitals. We assure the world that there will be no excesses against the women and everything will be done under the Islamic laws. We assure the entire world, the people of Kabul, diplomats living in Kabul, the world bodies, the NGOs, all the organizations that from now on, no one will be threatened and there will be no access against anybody. We assure the people of
Do you want to be your own boss and make income or extra income with flexible schedule? Welcome to Keenan Courier. Keenan Courier works as a marketplace platform connecting customers who need something delivered with drivers that are willing to serve them. Courier with any vehicle, better trip allocation, and cash out your earnings whenever you want. Download our driver apps today to sign up.
Hello and welcome back to the Chat Up Show. I'm your host, Elizabeth Aloyde, and I'm joined here by a special guest and co-host, Kenny Baz. And we've been discussing the current situation in Afghanistan as the Taliban has effectively taken over the country, especially the capital, Kabul. And before we went on break, we were watching the press conference of the Taliban spokesperson speaking about what the Taliban's plans are, essentially for the future.
But hearing
not in depth.
Hearing what they said, the little clip we were able to bring forth, right? First of all, let's talk about credibility.
What makes it credible to you?
I'll tell you. Would they ordinarily want to do it? I think they would not ordinarily do what they are saying. Are they going to do what they say in the press conference? Yes. It is clear in that speech that they want to have a relationship with the rest of the world. They don't want to be isolated. It's clear in their moves so far, because the American embassy and all the other embassies are still there, that they want to show the world that they are different people. It's also clear by having a woman there to ask those questions that this is who they are now. I don't know who they are before. Because of the economic relationship or global relationship they want to have with the rest of the world, they have understood, in my opinion, that they have to kind of come correct to a degree. Even though they had made it clear that they are not going to compromise when they come to their spiritual belief. However, they're willing to play the ball with the rest of the world.
NGOs, diplomats.
Yes. So for them to realize that they actually know what it will cost them if they don't do it, because of what it may cost them, they will do it, in my opinion. So yes, it's credible.
And I mean, just something that you mentioned, like this is the first time we're seeing physical face-to-face, like a spokesperson that people can interact with and ask these questions. So clearly they definitely do want to be recognized as a government group.
Now, let me digress a little bit. What if it happens that they have been sponsored by another country?
Kenny, I'm glad you brought this up.
What if it happens that they have been sponsored by another country to fight another country indirectly?
Now, some people have some speculation about which country this could potentially be.
And which country has quickly accepted them?
China.
So there's a lot of politics behind it. There's a lot of power tussle. The world today globally is in a situation whereby there are a group of countries they are struggling for the leadership position.
Yeah.
And this happens not to be by election.
Yeah.
It's by who is the strongest. When I mean strongest, I mean economically, physically, militarily, and otherwise.
I mean, they have to be getting funding from somewhere.
Of course.
I mean, we mentioned the opium.
This is my
sword.
first question.
Yeah.
My first question was looking at the map, for God's sake. The map was popping up as if, pam, 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 look at it right there, look at it.
Yeah.
Look at how it's moving, like 3, 4 at a time, 5 at a time. That has to be some finances behind it. Look at it.
Stationed
Yes.
across the country.
That has to be a lot of money involved, a lot of weapon, a lot of planning, a lot of logistic behind this.
It's 20 years in the making, though. Like, that's also another thing that we have to remember.
So,
even though they were technically fighting a war themselves, if we want to put it in that term.
Will you say that some other country is directly or indirectly fighting another country using Afghanistan?
Let's talk about these other countries. So for one, Russia, their response is that the U.S. intervention in Afghanistan was a spectacular failure. That's where they come from. And, you know, this is after the U.S. essentially came in to kick out the Soviet Union. So there's Russia that's saying that the U.S. should have been gone a long time ago, that shouldn't have even been there. And despite naming the Taliban a terrorist group, Russia appears ready to engage if it can ensure security for its own diplomats.
Before you proceed, you can now tell why the press conference sounded like that. The press conference is positioning them to engage with those allies that are willing to align with them. Continue.
Another ally, China, as well, as long as that they don't engage with the Uyghur refugees, which are the Muslim refugees that, you know, even with China, that has been an issue where reports of concentration camps have been popping up. So that was essentially their main thing. But
now,
they will recognize.
Let me draw a picture out of this. The two countries we are talking about, who is their common enemy?
United States.
So the picture is being painted.
Yeah.
So now, the question now is, let's, all of us as we're watching, listening, shall take a deep breath. When two elephants fight, the grass is the only person that suffers it. Who is going to suffer this fight? Let's take a deep breath. Who is going to pay the price for this?
I don't think it's going to be the U.S.
You think it's China?
I
Or
don't
you think it's
any
Russia?
of these other influences. I think at the end of the day, the person that's going to pay the country that's going to pay the price is Afghanistan. If it's having all of these different
in my own
influences
point,
still.
this is a rat race. 1980 something, 18 something, it's just repeating itself. It's a rat race.
But the thing is, like, another thing that we want to point out is the Taliban does not want Western influence in this new governance.
They have never wanted it.
Of course, but like now as the government of the Taliban. So is that
But what is different here is that they are saying that we don't want your influence, but we want to coexist.
Yeah. So like, we'll take your money, but you can't get
and we are not saying you don't exist.
Yeah.
We want to coexist with boundaries. They even went on to talk about international boundaries.
Yep.
So they spoke a lot about things. So my own thing is that this is a political ping pong that the big countries, the power that run the world are playing. It's a political ping pong. This is just show of power, show of force. And if you ask me, this is my opinion, and I have right, I'm entitled to my opinion, American woefully lost. Lost to China, lost to Russia. Because now the influence of China, the influence of Russia is going to be...
Do you think it's enough though?
It's going to be increasingly growing every day in Afghanistan.
Oh yes, in Afghanistan.
And then
with the rest of the
once
world.
when they tie the knob with them properly, they're in bed. So it's a strong ally. Remember, one of the strategies the Americans are using, in my own opinion, is to make sure that these people are not an ally. China are not getting more allies.
Yeah.
Not only that, China is at the same time in Africa, manifesting like hell. So, the fight is who is going to rule the world in the next 20 years. The fight is not, in my opinion, it's not just Afghanistan. And Afghanistan itself is also fighting to be one of the world leaders.
Yeah, and I honestly think that they came together and essentially decided what was going to go on. It just continued, it never ended.
But there's a question that I ask, and if anybody knows the answer, should write it. Who suffers? Because you know what? The president flew, as a matter of fact, a nice jet. And right now, as we speak, it's secured. The Americans went back home.
Canadians are on the way home.
They're on the way home. Even those Canadians that are not military, they are being brought home. Who suffers, if there's anything to suffer about? So don't you think it's actually wise for people to just make sure that they operate within the premises of what works for them, so that we all can have peace?
I don't know. I don't think the world can just like look on. I feel like there are a lot of egos at play here. There are a lot of big egos when it comes to the countries that have been involved. And I don't think that they're just going to be able to look on. I mean, America's planning to evacuate 9,000 daily.
That's easy.
Of course. But I mean, well,
They have the resources.
we've only done 807
They,
so
they,
far.
they,
in
have, they,
Canada.
have, they, have, they have the resources.
But they have the resources.
Do you know all the biggest warship in the world?
Yeah.
They have the resources. They want to do it.
And this is why I'm saying I don't
The
think they're
question
going
is
to back down.
become political. The Democrat will be like, it's good or it's bad. The Republican will be like, it become a political ping pong that people use in their election campaign, that people use, whereas real people are dying. Real human beings are suffering. So, telling me you're taking 9,000 is, do you know how many a big jet take?
I mean, to be like, just to continue off of that point, do you think that their thing is like, let's just evacuate everybody and then it's just you guys?
That's part of it. Also, it's not about looking good. It's not about, it's politics.
Being the savior.
Yeah, it's not about looking good. Because who really want to save is not applying solution when the problem emerge. Solving the problem before it emerge. That's how you become a savior. So, I am not a politician. I just work for GBKM. But I have enough brain to read along between the lines. You're not going to tell me that the Taliban has not phoned Chinese president, or have not spoken to.
Oh, they've been in contact. Yeah, they said it.
They all knew this map. You're not going to tell me that the intelligent community did not see this coming. They didn't see this map. Look at the way it's growing. Bang, bang, growing. In days, bang, everything is taken. You're not going to tell me with the technology we have today, they did not know.
Yeah.
The question is, did it worth their time? Did it worth it? Politically, how does it play? Look at the speech our president made.
I mean, the thing, it's like when the U.S. initially left Afghanistan, when the Islamic guerrilla groups were essentially having their own civil war. The U.S. was like, that's not our problem. That's between you guys. That's amongst you. I feel like that's what a lot of these other powers are like. Oh well, if it's amongst you, it's got nothing to do with us.
So the problem is,
we won't risk our.
The
own
problem
man.
is, if you are going back to that beginning, 18 something, right?
No,
If
this
that-
was even like the after the Soviet.
Okay,
1992.
but if you are leaving me, you leave me.
Better than-
Let's say we have 5 people fighting, and you leave everybody unarmed. Without you arming them, everybody fend for themselves to fight a war. It's fair war. But if I put you aside and say, you know what, I'm going to give you this amount of ammunition because I saw some potential in you that you will work for me in the future while you are governing your country, then it's not a fair fight.
Yep.
And now, rumor has it that some country will even bring this party, give them ammunition, bring the other party, and give about 3 party ammunition to fight.
Do you actually want to know the figure since 2001?
That would be heartbroken.
Since 2001, Washington has spent more. Well, this is like nation-building efforts, but this is money essentially allocated to Afghanistan. 133 billion. This is for reconstruction, aid programs, and the Afghan security forces.
My question to you, you think Americans will spend that money with nothing back?
Yeah.
You think they will spend that money
Yeah.
with no return on investment? Anybody that is watching that thinks that they will spend that money with no return, I want to see your comment. Nobody will spend that money with no return on investment.
Yeah.
Look, common trade that America were doing with Canada. What did Donald Trump did? He said it was not fair. You remember the trade deal? He canceled it. He forgot that we buy all our helicopter, all our weapons, all our cars from them. You forget that. That's how they look at things. He must 100%.
Always benefit. Because 133 billion in the last 20 years.
How much did they make?
Of course, with inflation, calculated with inflation amount.
How much did they make back? And how much debt does the country still owe them?
But it's like just looking at how much that figure was. This is believing in an ideal world. All of the money towards security forces, all of the equipment was going to the Afghan military and wasn't just ending up in the hands of the Taliban. That is what we're assuming here, because
There's never a perfect world. That cannot be accurate. It cannot be accurate. And in my own submissive opinion, that number may be ballooned.
Yeah.
May be ballooned. What I'm saying, I don't have facts to back this up. I'm just saying, thinking as a human being, like, you know what I mean? I'm not going to work so hard. The Americans will pay tax and then I give it to Afghanistan just because I'm a younger brother to Jesus. So there's no free loaf anywhere.
Yep.
So if they are showing us how much they have spent, please, we beg to know how much they made.
So before we conclude today's show, who do you think is to blame?
Okay, I'll be political here for the first time.
Okay.
There's enough blame to share. Yeah,
That was so political.
Yes.
You didn't say anything.
There's enough blame
No.
to share because there's enough blame to share.
Yeah.
There's enough blame. I'll put it at that.
Okay, and that there we have it. There's enough blame to share. We will definitely keep you updated regarding what is going on in Afghanistan as well. And with that, that concludes the Chat Up Show for today. Make sure you continue to tune into the GBCam network. Make sure you keep up with us by listening and watching live 24/7. You know how to do that, but I'm going to remind you just in case you forgot. You can watch and listen live 24/7 at www.gbcam.tv or www.gbcam.fm. You can also download our free GBCam app so you receive all the same features on our web station on the app, and you will be notified every time we go live. Also, make sure you continue to follow us on Facebook and YouTube at GBCam Network, and Twitter and Instagram at GBCam Network. And you can follow me, your host, Elizabeth Aloidi, on Instagram and Twitter at TIS_Liz_O for more updates on what's going on the Chat Up Show. And with that, I will chat with you the same time, same place next week. Take care.
Do you want to be your own boss and make income or extra income with flexible schedule? Welcome to Keenan Courier. Keenan Courier works as a marketplace platform connecting customers who need something delivered with drivers that are willing to serve them. Courier with any vehicle better trip allocation, and cash out your earnings whenever you want.